Welcome to Tattletale. Here's today's story. She said I wasn't man enough for her, so I let her find out who was. I used to think all long-term marriages went through rough patches. That the spark faded, conversations got shorter, and affection became something you gave out of habit instead of want. But this didn't feel like a rough patch. It felt like she was slowly stepping out of our life to get the 1 foot out the door, testing the ground somewhere else. We'd been married 8 years. No kids by choice. Our plan was to enjoy life, travel, maybe buy a cabin one day. Lately, she'd stopped talking about someday entirely. Her hours started changing first. Work's been crazy, she said, slipping in later and later. Then it was networking events and client dinners, always with people I'd never met, never heard of before. She started dressing differently too. Not bad different, just sharper. Like she was going somewhere she wanted to be noticed. One night she came home smelling faintly of cologne. Not mine. Not the one I'd ever known her to wear from hugging friends or family. When I asked about it, she laughed. You're imagining things. Maybe I was. But the way she avoided my eyes when she said it made me want to imagine more. I decided to keep my mouth shut. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that asking direct questions when someone's hiding something just makes them better at lying. So instead, I watched. It's amazing how, once you start paying attention, you see things you never would have noticed before. Like the way she guarded her phone, now never leaving it on the counter when she went to the bathroom, keeping it face down at dinner, sliding it into her pocket the second it buzzed. She'd always been open with it before. Not because I asked to see it, I never shared it, but because she never had anything to hide. Then there were the sudden bursts of happiness. She'd be scrolling on the couch, and her face would light up in a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She'd dab out a quick message, then lock her phone and get up to switch the laundry or make tea. One Thursday night, she came home late again, claiming she'd been at a team drinks thing. Her hair was a little too neat, her lipstick a little too perfect for it to have been hours since she put it on. I noticed something else, a faint shimmer on her collarbone. Perfume. Not hers. Definitely not mine. While she showered, I went into the laundry room and checked the hamper. The dress she'd been wearing was at the bottom, folded in a way she never folded anything before throwing it in. I pulled it out and smelled it. There it was again, the same cologne from before. Stronger this time. I didn't confront her. Instead, I put the dress back exactly how I found it, closed the hamper, and sat down on the couch with my laptop. It was time to start digging. Not in a loud, movie-style way. In a quiet, meticulous way that makes someone think you're still clueless until the day you're not. I started small. The first thing I did was remember every detail she told me about her week dinners, meetings, errands, and jot them down in a notebook I kept in my desk drawer at work. I didn't want it lying around the apartment. I wasn't looking for a smoking gun yet, I was looking for cracks. 2 weeks in, I noticed the first one. On Tuesday, she said she had a late strategy meeting at the office. I wrote it down. 2 days later, I overheard her telling her sister on the phone about how she finally got to try that new tapas place downtown on Tuesday. I didn't react. I didn't let her know I'd caught the inconsistency. Instead, I filed it away. The second crack came the following weekend. She said she was running out for a quick grocery trip. I checked the store's location on my phone an hour later. She hadn't opened our shared shopping list app, which she always did when she actually went. I stayed home pretending to watch TV. 45 minutes later, she came back with 2 small bags way too small for the full list she claimed she'd picked up. I waited until she went to shower, then checked the receipt. Half the items weren't things we ate. 2 of them were men's toiletries. We don't have any male guests. By the 3rd week, I decided to track her location. Not by installing spy, were too obvious, too risky. I used the Find My Device feature we'd set up years ago in case one of us lost a phone. She'd forgotten about it. One Thursday night, her client dinner pinged at a residential address in the East End. Not a restaurant. Not an office. A building with private apartments. The dot stayed there for 3 hours. Then it moved to a liquor store for 5 minutes. Then back to the apartment building. I didn't call. I didn't show up. If I learned anything from that night, it was this: whatever she was doing, she was comfortable enough to take her time. That meant she didn't think I suspected the thing. And that more than anything gave me the upper hand. From that point on, I wasn't just collecting proof. I was planning. I knew that if I was going to take this all the way, I couldn't just rely on location pings and gut feelings. I needed something that couldn't be explained away with a well-rehearsed excuse. The first step was her phone. I didn't try to break into it, too easy to get caught, but I started paying close attention to her behavior with it. When she texted, when she smiled, when she tilted the screen just slightly away from my line of sight. One night, while we were watching a movie, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She didn't pick it up right away, probably thinking I was too into the movie to notice. When she finally checked it, her face shifted for just a second. The corners of her mouth curled, but her eyes stayed sharp, like she was reading something important. I memorized the name at the top of the screen. Evan. From there, I started pulling phone records from our shared account. She didn't realize that the account logs every call and text, not the content, but the times, dates, and numbers. Evan's number was all over the place. Late nights. Early mornings. During her lunch breaks. Even during a weekend trip she took to visit her cousin last month. The next layer was money. We still had the joint checking account, though most of our personal spending came from separate credit cards. I went through the joint account's transaction history for the past 6 months. Varied in between grocery runs and bill payments were charges from places we'd never been to get, wine bars, boutique hotels, restaurants well outside our usual range. Some of them were on days she told me she was working late. Others lined up with Evan's call and text patterns almost perfectly. The proof was stacking up, but I knew better than to act on it too soon. Instead, I started building duplicate screenshots of bank transactions, saved copies of call logs, timestamped photos of the receipts I found in her coat pockets. I kept everything on a flash drive in my desk at work, backed up to a cloud account she didn't know existed. And through it all, I never once hinted that I knew. I still made her coffee in the mornings. Still asked about her day. Still let her kiss my cheek on the way out the door. Because when the time came to end this, I wanted her thinking she had total control, right up until the second she didn't. Once I had enough proof to sink her without a word from me, I shifted from watching to positioning. I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to make sure when she fell, she had no way to climb back up. The first change I made was in our finances. She'd always left the boring money stuff to me: bills, mortgage payments, investments, so it wasn't hard to start quietly moving things. I rerouted my paycheck into a separate account under my name only. It looked like the same deposit in the joint account, but it was a monthly transfer from that private account, not my actual salary. That way, if she ever tried to drain the joint account in a panic, she'd get barely a month's worth of bills, not my income. Next came the assets. We didn't have a lot of car, a modest investment portfolio, some savings, but I started consolidating them into accounts where she wasn't listed. In the process, I paid off the car loan in full and moved the title into my name alone. She didn't notice a thing. Then I started touching her routine. Nothing dramatic, just little shifts. If she said she had to work late, I'd accidentally be home early. Not enough to catch her, just enough to make her wonder if she'd get away clean every time. If she planned a girls' night, I'd offer to drop her off since I was heading that way, then take a completely different route to a friend's place while really circling back to see if she was where she claimed. I never confronted her. I just wanted her to feel a faint, constant hum of uncertainty. One Friday, she mentioned another team dinner and got dressed like she was going to a wedding. I told her she looked amazing and asked her to text me when she got home safe. I knew exactly where she'd end up. Her location ping was at the same East End apartment as before. Instead of stewing about it, I drove to a diner across the street, parked in the back lot, and waited. At 11:47 p.m., I saw her leave the building with Evan. They kissed by his car like teenagers. She had no idea I was 30 yards away, watching. That night, I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. She thought she was untouchable, which meant I could take my time making sure that when I finally pulled the trigger, there'd be nothing left for her to land on. The key to destroying someone isn't just removing what they have, it's making sure they see it disappear while believing they can't stop it. And to do that, I needed Evan. Not in the obvious way. I wasn't going to confront him for a punch, or warn him off. That would just make them bond over theirs against the world fantasy. No, I was going to become part of his world without him realizing it. It started with social media. She'd mentioned his name in passing once, not to me, of course, but on a phone call I overheard while she was in the shower. I ran it through Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There he was. Evan Thompson. 33. Sales rep for some mid-tier tech company. Public profile littered with gym selfies, group shots at bars, and motivational quotes about grinding until you make it. Pathetic. But useful. I made a fake profile, nothing suspicious. Just a guy with a handful of posts, some travel photos, and a believable job. Then I joined a few of the same local interest groups he was active in, a hiking club, a whiskey-tasting group, and a young professionals networking page. Within a week, I was in the comments of the same thread he was. Dropping jokes, sharing recommendations, replying to other people in ways that made me seem familiar. 2 weeks later, he sent me a friend request. From there, I learned more in days than my wife had probably gotten out of him in months. He was careless online, posting pictures of expensive dinners, tagging locations, even sharing shots from inside that East End apartment. He wasn't shy about posting gym check-ins either. Same time every weekday. That meant I knew exactly when he was out of the apartment. That information would matter later. I didn't interact with my wife about him at all. I stayed the same. Loving. Warm. Predictable. But behind the scenes, I was weaving a net that had both their names on it. Where it was done tightening, they wouldn't just lose me. They'd lose each other. The first seed had to be invisible. Evan wasn't dumb reckless, yes, but not clueless. If anything came back to me, it would ruin the whole thing. So I needed to create tension between them without ever being in the picture. I started with small disruptions. Through the fake profile, I casually mentioned in a group chat that I'd seen a buddy out at a wine bar with a stunning brunette, described her in just enough detail that Evan's friends might think it sounded like my wife. I didn't name names. I didn't even say it was in the city. But sure enough, 2 days later, Evan posted a vague, slightly bitter status about people showing their true colors. That was my confirmation. Next, I found out where Evan kept his car during the day, a garage near his office. I knew the model and plate from watching him leave the apartment with my wife. One afternoon while he was at work, I left an anonymous envelope on his windshield. Inside was a printed screenshot of a flirty text exchange between a fake number I'd set up and my wife's contact name. It was vague enough to be deniable, but suggestive enough to spark suspicion. I didn't stop there. From the joint account, I made a few purchases that would look odd. A pair of cufflinks from a high-end store she'd never buy for me. A dinner reservation at a place miles from our home, booked under her name. All of it appeared on the bank statement she had access to. All of it was just incriminating enough to make her wonder. They were still seeing each other, but I could tell the cracks were forming. The post from Evan slowed. Her late night started ending earlier. And when she came home, she was quiet, or not guilty quiet, but annoyed quiet. Perfect. Because the next step wasn't just to make them doubt each other. It was to make them believe they'd been set up by someone close to them. By now, I had months' worth of proof, control over our finances, and 2 people who trusted me just enough to believe I wasn't part of their problems. It was time to start stitching the end game together. The first thing I did was create a new email account. Totally clean, no link to me. Then, using a VPN, I sent Evan an anonymous message. She's not who you think she is. Ask her where she was on April 12th. Ask her about the cufflinks. April 12th was the date of one of her client dinners that was actually at his apartment, but I'd also placed the cufflinks purchased that same afternoon. A perfect double bind. A day later, I gave my wife her own little push. I printed a screenshot of Evan's Instagram post from months ago, him with his arm around another woman at a rooftop bar. I slid it between the pages of a book she kept on her nightstand. It wasn't even damning in context or photo, could have been anyone, but I knew her. She'd fixate on it. From there, it started shaping the big night. I booked a table at a fancy downtown restaurant for our anniversary, a place she'd always wanted to go but that was notoriously hard to get into. I told her to dress up, that I had a surprise. She lit up like I hadn't seen in years. Meanwhile, through the fake profile, I invited Evan to a networking dinner at the same restaurant. Same night. Same time. Different name on the reservation. By the end of the week, I'd set the stage. All I had to do was fill the room with the right people to watch the whole thing burn. I called her parents. Her sister. A couple of our mutual friends. Told them I was planning something special for our anniversary and wanted them there to celebrate with us after dinner. No one suspected a thing. The trap was built. All that was left was to spring it, and I wasn't going to waste a single second of the show. The night of the anniversary, I played my role to perfection. I showed up at the restaurant early, wearing the suit she'd always said was her favorite. I greeted the hostess with a smile, confirmed our table, and tipped her well to make sure everything went smoothly. Everything was already smooth, just not in the way my wife thought. She arrived 10 minutes later, stepping out of a rideshare in a dress I recognized from our honeymoon. That alone almost made me laugh. Sentimentality from a woman who'd been using our marriage like a disguise for months. I stood, kissed her cheek, told her she looked incredible. She really smiled for the first time in ages. We ordered drinks. Chatted about meaningless things. She didn't notice me glancing over her shoulder at the front door every so often. At 7:04 p.m., Evan walked in. He didn't see us right away. He was dressed well, scanning the room like he was looking for someone. When his eyes finally found our table, his smile froze. My wife's did too. She tried to cover it with a laugh, pretending she'd just noticed someone she knew from work. But the color in her face drained as Evan's expression hardened. I excused myself to use the restroom, but really I was heading to the bar. That's where her parents, her sister, and our mutual friends were waiting, sipping champagne, believing they were about to join a celebration. Give us 5 minutes, I told them. Then head to our table, I've got a surprise. Back at the table, my wife was tense. Her phone sat between us, screen down, vibrating more than once. Evan had taken a seat at the bar, his drink untouched, eyes fixed on her. You okay? I asked. I'm fine, she said too quickly. Good, I replied. Because I've been looking forward to this for a long time. And then, right on cue, her family started walking toward us. Her smile snapped back into place when she saw her parents. For a moment, she probably thought this was exactly what I told them, a sweet anniversary dinner, family invited to share in the surprise. They all hugged her, congratulated us, took their seats. The hostess, bless her, kept the champagne flowing. I could feel her relax beside me, probably thinking whatever tension she'd felt a moment ago with Evan was safely tucked away in the background. She had no idea I'd invited the background to pull up a chair. Halfway through the appetizers, I stood. I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight, I said, raising my glass. 8 years of marriage is worth celebrating, but more importantly, it's worth telling the truth about. She looked up at me, confused. The smile still held barely. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small flash drive I'd been carrying for months. I placed it on the table between us. This, I said, is everything my wife has been doing behind my back for the past year. Locations, bank statements, messages, photos. A ripple of shock moved around the table. Her sister's jaw actually dropped. Her father's face went hard. I didn't want to ruin the evening, I continued, but since Evan decided to join us tonight. Heads turned toward the bar. Evan was frozen, glass halfway to his lips. It felt right to include him in the conversation. She started shaking her head. No, this isn't, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. I understand you drained our account for hotel rooms. I understand you lied to my face every week, and I understand you thought I was too blind to notice. The table was silent. The only sound was the faint clink of glass from the bar. Then I smiled just for her. But the thing is, I'm not the one walking out of here with nothing. That'll be you. I've already moved the assets, closed the accounts, and filed the papers. By the time dessert hits the table, you'll be down to whatever's in your purse. Her face went pale. And in that moment, I knew the real show was just about to start. Evan's chair scraped against the floor as he stood, and the sound cut through the silence like a blade. I didn't know you were married, he said, voice low but shaking with something between anger and humiliation. My wife looked around to face him. Don't you dare make it sound like you're innocent in this. Innocent, he scoffed, stepping closer to the table. You told me you were separated. You told me he was some controlling, deadbeat husband who didn't care about you. Her parents gasped. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. I stayed seated, letting the heat build. That's not true, she started, but Evan cut her off. Really? So what about the other guy, the one you were with when I couldn't make it over? That hit her like a slap. Her eyes went wide. She stammered, looking between him and the table. That's a lie, no, he said, smiling bitterly. It's payback. Someone sent me proof, pictures, messages. You think I didn't figure it out? You've been cheating on both of us. The table erupted in a chorus of shocked murmurs. Her sister's face twisted with disgust. Her father looked like he wanted to stand up, but didn't know who to hit first. She turned back to me, panic starting to bleed through her expression. He's lying. You have to believe me, I don't have to believe anything, I said calmly, leaning back in my chair. Because I'm like you, I came prepared. I tapped the flash drive on the table. Everything's on here, all of it, and everyone in this room can see it whenever they want. That was when Evan laughed short, sharp, bitter. Guess we both learned the truth tonight, huh? He said, looking at me. She's all yours. He walked out without another word, leaving her standing there, caught between chasing him and facing the wreckage she'd just created. I didn't move. I didn't have to, because the next thing she said would be the final nail. She stayed frozen for a few seconds, torn between running after Evan and staying put. Then she chose the wrong option. She sat down across from me, eyes darting between her parents and sister like she was playing to the jury. This isn't what it looks like, she said, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. He's twisting things. He's always been manipulative, and now he's trying to turn all of you against me. Her sister leaned forward, jaw tight. You mean to tell me those late nights, the money missing from the account, the text, all of that was him somehow? Yes, my wife said quickly, seizing the lifeline. He's obsessed with control, with making me feel like I can't breathe. I let her ramble for a full 30 seconds before I spoke. You're right, I said finally. I'm controlling. I controlled the accounts so you couldn't drain them while you were staying in boutique hotels with Evan. I controlled the paperwork so you'd wake up tomorrow with no access to a single asset we built together. I controlled the timing so that every person you care about could be here to see who you really are. I slid the flash drive across the table toward her sister. You can see for yourself. All of it's there. The location data, the receipts, the screenshots, everything. Her father spoke for the first time, voice like gravel. I'm done listening to this. He looked at her like she was a stranger. You need to leave. The air seemed to collapse around her. She stood, looking at me with something between hatred and desperation. You think you've won, but you'll regret this. You can't just erase me. I smiled. Already did. And then, right on cue, my phone buzzed a notification from the bank confirming the final transfer into my private account. Her eyes flicked to it, realization dawning that she had nothing left to take. She didn't storm out right away. First, she scanned the table like she was hoping anyone would defend her. No one did. Her sister wouldn't even look at her. Her mother's eyes were glassy but cold. Her father sat rigid, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. When she realized she wasn't getting rescued, she pushed her chair back so hard it screeched across the floor. The entire restaurant seemed to pause for half a second. "Enjoy your little victory lap," she said, her voice sharp now, all the fake trembling gone. "This doesn't make you a better man. That makes you a coward who couldn't keep his wife." I didn't blink. "If keeping you means what you've been doing for the past year, then you're right, I'm not man enough for that." She grabbed her purse and walked out, heels striking hard against the marble floor. I didn't watch her go. Instead, I turned back to the table. "Thank you all for coming," I said evenly. "Dessert's on me, in fact." I glanced toward the bar, where the hostess was already watching the scene unfold. "Dessert's on me for everyone in the room." The cheer that went up in the background was the perfect curtain drop. After dinner, I didn't go straight home. I drove to the storage unit I'd rented 3 weeks earlier. Inside was everything of mine worth keeping, box, label, ready. I had been moving my life out of our house piece by piece, so she wouldn't notice. By the time she got back to the house that night, it would be empty of me. On my way out of the unit, I sent a final email from an anonymous account, not to her, but to Evan. It contained every piece of proof I had on her, then a few carefully chosen screenshots that made it look like she'd been using him to get to someone else the whole time. If she thought she'd run to him after this, she was about to find out he wasn't an option anymore. The next morning, I didn't wake up to my alarm. I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Missed calls. Texts. Emails. All from her. I didn't open a single one. Instead, I scrolled further down to the group chat her sister had with the family. She must have forgotten I was still in it. She showed up at our place at 3 a.m. crying. Dad wouldn't even let her in. She's at mom's now, but she's a mess. Another message from her sister followed a few minutes later, and guess who called? Evan. He said he's done with her too, said she was playing him the whole time. I don't know what she did, but he's furious. I set the phone down and smiled into my coffee. By noon, I was at my lawyer's office. We'd been ready to file for weeks, but I'd held off until after the anniversary. Now, with her public humiliation fresh in everyone's mind, the timing was perfect. The papers were signed, stamped, and sent by the end of the hour. No alimony. No shared property. Nothing left to fight over. 2 days later, she tried coming to the house. She stood in the driveway, hammering on the door, shouting my name. I watched from the upstairs window, perfectly still, until she gave up and stormed off. When she finally stopped trying to reach me directly, I knew she'd moved on to phase 2, damage control. Friends started telling me she was spinning news stories claiming I'd been emotionally abusive, that I'd set her up, that I was vindictive and unstable. But the thing about lies is, they don't work when you've already given people the truth first. Everyone she tried to pull in just looked at her like she was confirming exactly what they'd seen at the dinner. She wasn't just losing me. She was losing the version of herself she'd built in front of other people. And that, more than the money or the house or Evan, was what I wanted. Her final play came a week later. A letter. Not handwritten and typed. No return address. It was waiting in my mailbox when I came home from work. Inside, she laid out her proposal. If I agreed to give her a lump sum of fair compensation for our years together, she'd sign the divorce papers quietly, without dragging my name through the mud in court. I actually laughed out loud reading it. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. That same evening, I had my lawyer draft a short, blunt response. The settlement is here, the divorce isn't contested. Any further attempts to defame or harass will be met with immediate legal action. We attached copies of the receipts, photos, and call logs from the flash drive, enough to make it clear that if she wanted to fight, she'd be bleeding in the water before she even stepped in the ring. 2 days later, she sent a single text. "You'll regret this." I didn't reply. Because the truth was, the only regret I had was not starting sooner. By then, Evan had blocked her, her family barely spoke to her, and mutual friends were ghosting her one by one. She'd gone from the woman who thought she could juggle 2 lives to someone nobody wanted to be around, not because of what I told them, but because of what she'd shown them herself. That was the best part of the revenge. I didn't have to keep swinging. She was doing it to herself now. The court date came quicker than I expected. It wasn't even a dramatic, movie-style showdown. Just a short hearing, a judge with no patience for theatrics, and a few signatures that officially erase her from my life on paper. She didn't look at me once. I'm not sure if it was shame, anger, or just the realization that there was nothing left to take. Afterwards, I walked out into the crisp morning air with my lawyer, feeling lighter than I had in years. Everything was already settled. The house was mine. The accounts were mine. The car was mine. Every cent she tried to pull from me was gone, either spent or locked behind walls she couldn't scale. All she walked away with were her clothes, a few personal items, or whatever lies she wanted to tell herself about how it all went wrong. That night, I boxed up the last of her belongings she'd left behind, a few books, some framed photos, a drawer full of makeup, and dropped them at her mother's house. I didn't ring the doorbell. On the drive back, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt done. And that's when it really hit me. Revenge wasn't the public humiliation at the restaurant, or the way I cut her off from everything she'd built on my back. The real revenge was knowing I'd built a life without her while she was still standing in mine, and now she was the one left outside, watching it from the cold. It was about 3 months after the divorce was finalized when she tried to slip back in. It started small, like on one of my Instagram posts. I ignored it. Then came a just checking in text I deleted without opening. But she didn't stop. A week later, I came home from work and found her car parked across the street from my house. She was sitting in the driver's seat staring at her phone. I didn't go over. I didn't wave. I just walked inside, locked the door, and pulled the blinds. 2 days after that, she showed up at my office. The receptionist buzzed me to say your wife was here. I told her I didn't have one and to let building security handle it. When I left that evening, she was waiting in the parking lot. I just want to talk, she said, stepping toward me. I don't, I replied, unlocking my car. We said everything that needed to be said in court. She tried the old soft voice then, the one she used to use when she wanted to smooth over a fight. I've been thinking a lot about us, about how things ended. I looked at her for the first time in months. You've been thinking about you, I said flatly. And you can keep doing that, somewhere else. The next morning, my lawyer filed for a formal no-contact order. By the end of the week, she'd been served. It was over. Legally, socially, physically. She had no way in anymore. And the best part? I hadn't even raised my voice once. Life without her was quiet. The kind of quiet you don't realize you've been missing until it's there every morning when you wake up. No half-truths over breakfast. No late work nights that meant sitting alone wondering where she really was. No tension humming in the background like a bad electrical line. I started using my free time for myself, hit the gym again, picked up a couple of old hobbies, even reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years because she never liked them. It felt like reclaiming little pieces of me she chipped away at, one by one. Meanwhile, I heard bits and pieces about her through the grapevine. She'd moved into a small apartment across town. She was working part-time at a boutique she'd once scoffed at as beneath her. Evan had cut all contact. Apparently, he'd moved in with someone else within a month of walking out of the restaurant. Her social circle had shrunk to almost nothing. The same friends she used to brag to stop returning her calls after the truth got around. The irony was, I didn't even have to go out of my way to ruin her. She did that herself. All I did was make sure the curtain got pulled back before she could rewrite the script. One Saturday morning, I was at the farmer's market when I spotted her across the street. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in the way people look when they've been carrying around too much disappointment for too long. Our eyes met for half a second. She looked away first. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel pity either. I felt nothing at all. By the time spring rolled around, the divorce and all the chaos that came with it felt like a lifetime ago. I'd poured my energy into building something steady, a routine, a home that felt like mine again, a life that didn't have to be shared with someone who was waiting to betray it. I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious at first, but I was meeting women who made me laugh, who didn't make me feel like I was walking on glass. It was strange how natural it felt to be open again once the weight was gone. The last piece of closure came out of nowhere. I was having lunch with an old coworker when he mentioned, almost casually, that my ex had been telling people she left me because I was boring. I didn't get angry. I just smiled and pulled out my phone. "Check this out," I said, showing him a screenshot from the night of the anniversary dinner, the one where she's frozen in her seat as her entire family stares at her, Evan in the background ready to walk out. His reaction, the wide eyes, the low whistle told me everything. The truth was still out there. She could spin whatever story she wanted, but enough people knew exactly how it ended. And that meant her version would always crack under the weight of reality. That afternoon, I deleted the photo from my phone. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need it anymore. The proof, the planning, the revenge, it was all behind me. She was behind me. It was a Sunday evening when I realized I hadn't thought about her in weeks. Not her face, not her voice, not the mess she'd made, nothing. I was sitting on my back porch with a drink, watching the sun drop behind the trees. When it hit me, the story was over. Not the marriage. Not the revenge. The story. She wasn't a part of my life anymore, not as a partner, not as an enemy, not even as a shadow in the corner of my thoughts. A few days later, an envelope came in the mail from my lawyer. Inside was a single document, confirmation that all proceedings were closed and final. No appeals. No pending motions. The last legal thread tying us together had been cut. I folded the paper once, dropped it into the fire pit, and watched the flames take it. I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone. Revenge had already been served in the restaurant in the silence from her family, in a way she now walked through the world without the armor she'd built on my back. The real one was walking away without needing to look over my shoulder. And maybe one day she'll tell someone else her version of the story, painting herself as the victim. Maybe they'll believe her for a while. But somewhere out there are the people who sat at that table, who saw it all in full, who know exactly who she is. And that truth will follow her longer than I ever will. I finished my drink, leaned back in my chair, and let the quiet settle. This wasn't the start of a new chapter. It was the end of the book.